Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Great to have you back. Hope you and yours are doing well. Been another heck of a week, folks, hasn't it? Lots and lots to talk about. So let's get the crew in right away. Let's down there on the borders. We've got Uri on. Oh, nice feeling. Yeah, there we go. How you doing?
I had a malfunction there.
Welcome. You well?
I am, but the weather's a bit horizontal rain and gusts of wind. Well, normal, I suppose.
It sounds like July fair, the Glasgow Fair weekend. And over there in Edinburgh, as we're talking about the weather, we better bring in Lloyd Quinnan.
Hi, Roddy. Hi.
How you doing? Welcome. How's the weather in Edinburgh? I mean, it seems to be a thing we're talking about weather.
Grey and dreek, like it is in the minds of most members of the Scottish National Party.
Indeed, all on them, don't worry. And over there on the Coat de Brig, he's with us, the old Coatbridge Cavalier, before he goes back to the US of A. How you doing, my friend?
I totally sound. I was out last night with my brothers at a Burns night for the Beatson charity in Glasgow. It was a bit rough. I'm feeling a wee bit rough. That's the truth has to be said. But with a couple of stalwarts of the party, of the SNP, old friends from there, and passionate independent supporters. And sadly, the mood remains one that is reflected accurately, they believe, in this programme. So,
yeah, and of course I should say, as we're talking about it, it's always sunny in Coatbridge, we know that. And up there in Clackmannan, we've got our favourite lawyer. There she is, Eva. Hi Eva, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay, but I would say in line with your weather analogy, watching events developing this week in and around that Scottish Parliament, it's raining in my heart is the only thing that I can say to adequately describe how I feel. So looking forward to a robust debate again today. I guess that we need that.
Can I just say at the outset of this podcast, there's no chance ever, this one or any other podcast either, you'll be asked to be quiet. The exact opposite. We want you to keep talking all the time. So put that. And if those of you don't know why, you should research. I'm not going to give any plugs. Now, just before we start, one bit of one of our great viewers and loyal supporters of the pub programme, Carlo there, has sent us in. We're going to bring in a new competition to follow for all our viewers, and it's called Where's Peter? Because Peter Morell's not been seen in months and months and months. Now, if you see him anywhere, we want you to take a picture, tell us where you saw him, and we'll send you a free Through a Scottish Prism pen. That's the kind of generosity you get from us here. Okay, so remember, every week I'll be asking, where's Peter? Banished off the face of the earth. Maybe someone should look under the patio. That's all I'm saying. Right, here we go. Let's start on a more serious note. And one of the biggest events, I would suggest, in a long while, happened this week down in Westminster with Neil Hanvey's stick up that picture and compliments to our friends at Wings Over Scotland. Neil Hanvey's Scottish Self-Determination Bill. Lloyd, it didn't come as any great surprise that our English nationalist friends in the Parliament in Westminster overwhelmingly voted down any kind of self-determination for Scotland. The only encouraging thing I saw was that a lot of the SNP MPs joined at last with Neil. But it was an inevitable outcome, was it not? I can't hear you. You're muted. Pound?
Twice in 1 week. Right. It was inevitable it would be voted down simply by the numbers, and we know the numbers. Scotland cannot win at the Westminster Parliament, neither can Northern Ireland, neither can Wales. It's as simple and straightforward as that. But and in some ways, it's like history repeating itself. There were self-determination bills for Scotland in the 1890s right up until 1910, in actual fact. Only one of them ever passed its first reading, and then were removed later. But the key thing here is, and it's what Neil's doing right, you have to keep this front and centre. The whole point of Westminster is to grind Scottish nationalist, Welsh nationalist, Irish nationalist members of Parliament down, make them feel like it's an irrelevance for them to talk about what their central principle is. And what you have to do is you have to maintain that steel that says, no, we will keep it on the table, and we will keep it on the table day in, day out. In actual fact, what we should have been doing from day one in the Scottish Parliament as well, so long as you're operating within the structures of the British state, it is merely a platform for us to present the good common sense idea that all countries should be independent and members of the United Nations. Well done, Neil Hanvey.
Yeah, were you surprised with the outcome, Eva?
There were highs and lows for me. It was a great high to see the SNP supporting the bill in huge numbers. I mean, I think every SNP member who was there supported Neil, and that was good to see. We need more of that. We need that constantly. That unity of purpose has got to be seen, and that is why we should be talking in terms of country before party on a daily basis until our independence is achieved again. What was interesting was to see that the Tories abstained and Labour voted against it. How surprising. And that more than anything tells you that it is utter folly for the SNP to be talking about cooperating with a future Labour government at Westminster. Labour are no friends of the Scottish people. 2 Labour MPs, one of them elected most recently as the result of the Rutherglen by-election, promised
Stick it up, Techie.
country. And what did they do? Voted against their own country's right to self-determination. You think about this, what Neil's bill sought to do was simply to enable the Scottish Parliament to run a referendum. What is that other than democracy, plain and simple? It's what the people in Northern Ireland have got. Why can't the people of Scotland have it? We know why. It's because support for independence is on the rise. If that referendum was going to be held later on this year, perhaps on the 10th anniversary of the 2014 referendum in September, what you would see between now and then is that support for independence would continue to rise and independence would win. Independence would see the day. That's why this democracy is being denied, because everybody knows, notwithstanding the fact that the SNP are rather low in the polls, the support for independence is at least 50%, if not higher, and it will get higher when there is a date fixed for an electoral event, and that date will be fixed come hell or high water. That will happen, but it's incumbent on the SNP particularly to support all initiatives by ALBA and other independent supporting parties and make sure that that question of self-determination remains, as Lloyd said, in the forefront every single day at every opportunity.
Phil, I've written a couple of articles, in fact more than a couple, that in all the time from 1936 till today, the SNP have only won 2 votes or such in Westminster. One of them was actually when they didn't win a vote. It was when you were there, in the fox hunting bill, where the Tories dropped it because they knew they were going to lose because the SNP had said they would not support it. And the other one was when the claim of right was nodded through. You know, I suppose Westminster, knowing full well, they would just ignore that later anyway. And yet, we're still in Westminster. It didn't come as a shock, did it, to you, that we lost that vote?
No, I'm with the guys on this one. It was very encouraging to see the support from SNP members finally getting behind something. Finally, you can see the names of the individuals who still feel that independence is important. I mean, I'm not saying they're all as passionate and as driven as they were, and they should be, because it has to be kept front and centre. 100% agree. Use the system. Talk about it. I mean, Lloyd's right. Keep it on the table. Country before party, as Eva said. So we're seeing a wee bit more of that, and that was encouraging. And when you see the National you know, describe Neil Handley's, what they said, this is a quote, Neil Handley's Scotland Self-Determination Private Members Bill is fundamentally flawed in a number of ways. It is flawed in that it concedes to the British Parliament the authority to veto the right of self-determination that is wholly vested in the sovereign people of Scotland. Now, what we've got here is the National. If the National is criticising you, you must be doing something right. That's the sad state of affairs we're currently at. And what we understand of it is we do need to talk about. We need to make it higher profile. We need to shake loose those members in the SNP that now seem to have the whip hand. That, including some really capable people, seem to be backing away from talking openly about independence, and that is not acceptable. I mean, I'm 100. If you just listen to the first opening line of the bill, please read it, guys. Go and we'd ask all viewers to go and read this and understand the situation that we currently face. What Neil said, he begs to move that leave be given to bring the bill to amend the Scotland Act 1998 to transfer the power to legislate for a Scottish independence referendum to the Scottish Parliament. And it goes on to talk about, it will be exercised when the public has demonstrated. It's basically democracy personified. What you see here is the mechanisms within this system that we currently, this corrupted, this tilted, this flawed system that we currently have, but we're using the system. He's using the system, or trying to use it to show what we already know to be true, that the majority of Scots are now wanting independence. And that was very difficult last night. There was a lot of wealthy people, and there was a lot of comedians and jokes were fired and bandied about last night at a big charity event with influential people with quite a lot of money, and much of them were at the expense of the SNP and our cause. And that is what Nicola and these clowns have done. They have reduced what we created under Alex when he brought us from 28% right up to 51% just before the 2014 referendum, and then sadly back to 45% where we finished because of various reasons, various factors, scare tactics, and the control of the media by the establishment. So a friend of mine sitting beside me, an old colleague from the party who's still a member, but absolutely gutted and knows the writings on the wall, and he, ex-councillor, and we were sitting there and we had to take the ridicule and the laughter from people who don't pay attention. They see the headlines, they see that if you want there's a prize lottery for this, if anybody wants £100,000 van to scoot about Scotland in, the one that was parked there, that was stolen basically, and this is going to end very badly. Again, it will continue. They will hung, draw and quarter, or the equivalent of it, worthies in the SNP, and tie in the notion of independence as being nonsense and being the stuff of dreams and the will of idiots and thieves. And they've played right into that hand. Nicola, your husband, all of these current incumbents in the SNP who fail to drive the only thing that can save our people from poverty, the only issue that allows us to stand on our own 2 feet and make our own decisions, is self-determination. And the sooner we get that, the sooner we can fix all of these ills. And do you know what? It's not the most important. We sat there and took it, the ridicule from people who don't know, but we just have to continue, because remember whose shoulders we stand upon. Remember the spitting at some of our representatives when they were in office. Remember how we were laughed at. And remember Gandhi's saying as well, about first they laugh at you, but no, we need to keep this going. So good on you, Neil. I support everybody who supported Neil on this. I wish there was more of you, and I wish the SNP would get their act together and remember who they work for, the people. If you get a notion that it might be different, we'll talk about it and be open about it. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the vast majority of Scots, and anyone that I speak to, not vast majority, but the majority of Scots, and we're still at about 50-50, want independence. It's our job, or those who are elected members, to bring that to us, and the SNP are not delivering that right now.
Correct. A funny story on that one was that your pal Pete Wisher, my pal Pete Wisher as well, was criticising the Alba bill the day before and then voted for it when he was told what to do. What? Anyway, Yvonne, no one in Scotland can be under any doubt now. This is not a union of equal partners. Very much it's a colony, and no one can deny that anymore. Be it de facto colony, but it's not a union of equals, is it?
No, it's not. And Neil Hanvey exposed that, you know, if anyone was in any doubt, it's finished now. And the only way that we are going to get independence in the near future is civil disobedience. And that is the only way the people will deliver independence, because Neil's heroic performance has shown us that simply playing the numbers game, we can't win independence through Westminster. It's not going to happen. So we then have to look at alternative ways. And to hear the SNP say, oh, realistically, we've got to sit back for another 10 years. What? We don't have time for that. A lot of good people have already gone to their graves disappointed. And we just don't have time for that. The time is now, and we've got to do something about it now, and we've got to start thinking out of the box. But anybody who thinks that Westminster will deliver is living in cloud cuckoo land.
I agree. I mean, I lost complete faith. That was the thing that got me, Lloyd. The very next day, all of the Scottish MPs, and I didn't see the Alpa ones, but I assume they were there as well, Prime Minister's questions. I'm thinking, why are you there? What's the point? Yesterday, you were showing that there's no point in any Scottish independence MP being in there. Am I wrong to think that, or do you think they should stay there?
No, but it's part of the performance, Roddy. You know, you've got to be there for Prime Minister's question time because that's the one that's on the telly. And after a period of time, you know, Phil's an exception to the rule here, but after a period of time, Scottish National Party members of Parliament, and this has happened over the years, this is as true in 1974 as it is now, a certain group of them will be sucked into the system. They operate on the basis of the same way as the English members do, which is these are the highlights of the week. These are the places where you must be. These are the things that you do to be a good parliamentarian. Everything is the opposite of what our members of Parliament should be doing, as Neil proved by bringing forward his private members bill. But this whole idea of I wish to be judged at Prime Minister's question time. Did I score a hit on the Prime Minister? The same thing happens at First Minister's question time in the Scottish Parliament. You know, and it was us in the SNP who were wondering whether we'd made a mark on Donald Dewar or on Henry McLeish or on Jack McConnell. It becomes part of the bubble. It becomes part of the culture, and it takes particularly strong-willed individuals to avoid falling into those elephant traps and finding that they are part of, remember that famous phrase from George Robertson, devolution in the Scottish Parliament will kill the SNP stone dead. He wasn't talking about politics. He was talking about the fact that the system corrupts individuals, and individuals who wish or pretend to have power in politics are easily the most corruptible. And the British have been doing this for 300 odd years. They know how to do it. The structures are there to deliberately undermine anyone with any strength. That's a simple, straightforward fact. We cannot win at Westminster. And for those that currently are saying, oh, the only priority for the people is the cost of living crisis, you don't understand what independence means if you can even use that phrase. The way to deal with the cost of living crisis is to become independent, control our own economy, and we become as rich as Norway within a very short period of time.
There is a school of thought, Eva, and it's come. What gets me, Techie, could you get ready to stick up that Stephen Noon, the ex-communications guy from the Yes Group, who said that the Scottish public are more interested in getting rid of the Tories than independence. Now, that's coming from our own side. I call it, friendly fire, if you like. That's not what I'm feeling. But that's certainly what the establishment and the SNP are promoting this. I'll get rid of the Tories. We got rid of them in '92. There wasn't a Tory MP left in Scotland. What's getting rid of the Tories all about? To be replaced, as we've just shown, by the Labour Party? Where's the difference? They're all English nationalists.
I don't call that fire particularly friendly. I think it's divisive, it's irresponsible, and what it does is it reduces the aspiration of our nation, absolutely, fundamentally. As Lloyd has just finished saying, the purpose of the exercise is to get independence so that our country and our people become wealthier. We look after our people. They don't die prematurely as the result of addictions or hypothermia or hunger or depression. That's the stark reality. And, I really have to ask myself, what planet people like Stephen Noon actually live on? Because I'll tell you what, it doesn't look anything like the surface of Clackmannanshire. We've got 25 to 30% of our people living in poverty, but we've got an SNP-controlled council, an SNP MSP and an SNP MP. What we need without delay is for every one of these elected politicians to read the blog that was done this week by Denise Finlay using the hashtag Indie First, where she gives them exactly the advice that they need, that Angus Brendan McNeill has been providing for long and weary. And it's about how to make a solution for Scotland in Scotland, particularly opposite this week when we see that Westminster's position and Neil's self-determination bill defeat democracy in Scotland. The way to create democracy for Scotland is to do it in the Scottish Parliament, for Humza Yousaf to resign and for there to be an election because there is no First Minister for a few weeks. That's the way to do it, and it could be done this year. It could be done this year if the SNP genuinely wanted independence for our country. That is what they should do. Denise's blog sets out the path fairly and squarely, and if the SNP don't follow that path, there can be only one explanation, and that is that they are no longer the party for independence. If they are the party for independence, prove it. Show us your colours once and for all, because this year's your chance.
Correct. Phil, you were heavily involved in the Yes movement in 2014. Did it come as a shock to you that someone like Stephen Noon would say something as crass as the people of Scotland are more interested in getting rid of the Tories than they are of getting independence? You're on mute, buddy. Why is everyone on mute today? You're still on mute.
It's just it should beg our belief, but it doesn't. That's the problem, right? That is the problem. We've crossed the Rubicon. SNP have crossed the Rubicon now with this backing away from independence. There's no turning back from that. With the individuals who are doing that, you should all be jettisoned. You should be out, gone. No more do you represent the will of the people of Scotland. And again, when you see the national reporting, there's a couple of headlines that grab me, and it just irritates those of us who understand what we've just been articulating here. There was one headline, it's time to move on from the mindset of being the 45. I took great pride in being part of that 45% and working hard to make it 50.001%, or whatever it would be. And the National goes on to talk, it introduces what is the independence movement strategy. Well, that's a damn good question. It's a damn good question. And you say that their headline, they start talking about in the paper, looking back to the period just before the first SNP government was elected, the core elements of the strategy were clear. Well, listen to yourself, people who are reading the National, not that there's very many of you, but those who would put that into print and try to put forward a message that it is time to move on need to take cognizance of the fact that what you've done in this is spell out exactly what we should be doing and what we were about. When we understood, when we were a unified group, we knew what the prime directive was. The core elements of the strategy were clear. We had a target. from which flowed everything else. And then we worked out the short and medium-term tactics. Another headline they use is the division in Scottish politics around independence debate means it is time to consider a third way. And that's another quote from Stephen Noon, former chief strategist at Yes Scotland. And the thing that rings terrible for me here is the division that is created by the SNP is the reason now they're using as justification to consider a third way and abandon independence. Who are you working for, Stephen Noon? SNP, who has their claws into you? Why are you backing away from the only, as we've said many, many times, I mean, yes, just as Eve has pointed out, and we've been talking about for a long time, we need to fold this parliament while we still can, because a bloody nose is coming. And then it sets us back even further. And, you know, there's sadly a recognition that you shouldn't throw the dice in a desperate attempt on a gamble. But when Alex took us from 28% to 51, we had clear direction. We knew what we were doing, and we had a long period to do it and a plan. The problem here now, I am reticent. I fear throwing the dice might be a deliberate piece of sabotage. That's the problem, because the people currently in control of the SNP and the Scottish Government are not acting as friends. They're not acting as supporters of independence. They're acting as pawns of the British establishment, and that, more than anything, makes me less comfortable about the fact that I don't think we're going to do anything about this. I want independence more than anything. It's the only thing. We know it's the only thing that's going to work. And everybody, ask every naysayer, so what's your solution? What's your solution to closing Grangemouth? What's your solution to fuel poverty? What's your solution to all of the poverty that people faces and the suffering? And there is no answer. They don't have an answer. If anybody says it's Labour, they need a check-up from the neck up. We know it to be independence, and we need to get back onto that. And people at Stephen Noon are not doing himself, the SNP, or the Scottish independence movement any favours by continuing this deconstructive narrative that is continuing to drive a wedge between factions within the independence movement, and more it's becoming a faction of those who want independence now, let's do it, let's get our act together, and those who continue to sit on the gravy train and continue to trough. Animal Farm. It's a disgrace.
Indeed. Yvonne, with what Stephen Noon's saying, and also what happened, was our first topic about Westminster. Back in January the 31st, 2020, our then First Minister, Nicola I can announce today, announced she was going to have a constitutional convention. We are here now 4 years on and nothing's happened. But it wasn't what happened on Tuesday. You know, instead of saying, let's get rid of the Tories, shouldn't everyone have been saying, let's get together? We've proved in Westminster yesterday or Tuesday we could, unite as one independence movement. Let's now unite as a constitutional convention, and let's come up with a plan and a strategy with everyone from all parties, from Civic Scotland, etc., to see how we get our independence. Would that not have been a better option?
There are two sorts of people in Westminster, those who want independence and those who don't. And I don't see Tories, Labour, Lib Dems, any of them. You either want independence or you don't. And saying, let's beat the Tories. What on earth would we achieve by being replaced by a party led by Keir Starmer, who's more conservative than half of those sitting in the benches opposite him? It's a nonsense. Let's just get independence. We need to keep our eye on the prize and focus. The big question now that Neil Hanvey has pulled the strip plaster off and exposed what's there is we've got a general election coming up. Do we fight for Westminster seats? I remember when you and I, Roddy, spoke at an Alipur conference in favour of abstentionism. And I think, you know, it was a brilliant debate. And we lost by a few votes. There had to be a count. And I just think that, you know, we may have to return to abstentionism, the subject of it, rather than later. We've certainly got to show Westminster that we don't need them, that we can still carry on without them. The Irish have done it very successfully. And, you know, we're hearing that Sinn Féin still have elected members. They still fight in general elections. They still have MPs representing their constituencies. What Sinn Féin don't do is humiliate themselves by going into Westminster and asking those charlatans for anything.
Yeah.
Democracy is an illusion. We've already seen that through all of the marches and demonstrations over Gaza, and yet still the government is with the minority. So democracy is it's just an illusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need
It is in the UK. In the West, it is. Certainly in the West, it is. It's definitely illusionary. Lloyd, do you think a constitutional convention now more than ever is required to move to get everyone to coalesce around, get us into one unit, and come up with a strategy that we can all push against the wheel to get?
Theoretically, yes. 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely, without a doubt. We have the people, we have the intent, we have the vision. My concern, and it's a concern that's expressed by many people, particularly on social media, but also in the aisles of supermarkets. How can you go into a constitutional convention with a Scottish National Party that currently will not tell the truth either to its own members or to its own voters, that they have now internally moved to the same position as Stephen Noon, which is this position of maximum devolution? Now, I know that's what they're talking about. A select few, the other ones will just wander along with it because they're just the crowd. They need to be honest with people. And if we're to have a constitutional convention, then the SNP has to go into it on the basis of it will accept the majority view. And at the moment, everything the SNP does says it won't accept the majority view. It will accept its own view and its own view only. That appears to be the strategy. And that's why Stephen Noon is getting sent out as the point man for the devolutionists. Stephen came back onto the scene, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, appeared back out of nowhere. And suddenly he's on television, radio, and in the newspapers expounding at this new line that comes from within the national movement. Well, it doesn't come from within the national movement I'm a part of. This is a softening up exercise. And because of that, I say, yes, I believe firmly in a constitutional convention, but how can you go into a constitutional convention with people who are secretly devolutionists and not in favour of the absolute independence of our country? What would be the point?
I agree. Even a couple of years ago, Nicola Sturgeon, and one of her many times, horrified us all by going public and saying she really didn't like the name of the party, the N. She didn't like the national word. And we were all horrified when she said it. Now, Holmesy came in and said, I'm not Mr. Continuity. And hey, this week, along with all those things we're talking about softening us up and moving to a devolutionary position, he suddenly comes out with the exact same words as his mentor, his boss, his puppeteer, whatever you want to call it. I've never been comfortable with the National and SNP, same as he's not comfortable with white people living in a white majority country. He is Mr. Continuity, been worked from behind.
Absolutely. It's really disappointing to see this, but it's not surprising. It's abundantly clear that some people just don't understand the meaning of the word national. It means of the country, of the whole country, throughout the country, for the whole country, for everybody in the country. That's what it means. That's why we've got a National Health Service. Is that to be renamed? It's why we've got a National Portrait Gallery. It's why we've got the National Trust for Scotland. It's incredibly pathetic. But when he's saying something as stupid as that, given the continuity game away, he's trying to divert your attention away from the stuff that we should be paying attention to. And that is the need for the independence debate to be the priority. It's the need to address all the areas of public life in Scotland that he's responsible for that are currently shambolic, whether that's hospital waiting lists or ambulance waiting times or difficulties in education or the utter, absolute, complete and total disgrace of the criminal justice system in Scotland. I mean, one of the events that's going to occur quite soon is that evidence is to be taken at committee in respect to the prospect of having jury-less trials. And what are the committee doing? They're proposing to hear from a number of interest groups who favour that change, and they are silencing the defence lawyers of this country. The defence lawyers who know better than most people why we need a system of juries. They're not going to be given evidence in the main, even although they're the folk that know exactly what they're talking about. Now, does that sound familiar? Because it's the path that they went down with the GRR bill when they did their best to silence women. Well, the women didn't wheeshed. And if you think for 1 minute, Humza Yousaf, that the defence lawyers in the country are going to wheeshed and let you away with that, you have got another think coming. You couldn't do a law degree, you were a rubbish justice minister, and your job as first minister is turning into the absolute disgrace and the sellout that a lot of us thought it would be. So renaming your party should be the last thing on your mind. Rewriting the future of this country is what you should be doing.
Yeah, think, Phil, does Humza really think we're also think that we wouldn't remember this is exactly what Nicola said, and he spoke as if he had just invented this idea that national was a bad word. Does he take us for fools?
Apparently he does, yes. And Humza he's Mr. Continuity. We've said it before, and it's just another piece of evidence here that that is indeed the case. He is deflecting. This is deflection. It's been long held that there has been a difficulty in the connotations of the word nationalist or nationalism and an association with fascism. But Eva's right, it's all of the nation, and certainly not fascist, because Scotland is not a fascist country. In fact, you would look at the misnaming and misuse of nationalism. Probably the most famous one is the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which, as you and I know now, was called the Nazi Party. And there's nothing socialist about what they want, and the national connotation is being brought to bear here. So a lot of people are using that to try and say, and it was actually considered, the Scottish National Party, that word national did throw up connotations and associations with a more unpleasant part of politics. But no, I think we should be clear about what words mean, and more importantly, what actions we carry forward. And if you have ever used the words independence and it's something you seek and you're part of the SNP, you should be talking about that and acting in that manner that brings us closer to independence. That is unification, of course, and it's everything we've spoke about, and changing a name isn't going to change that. It's just really going to, again, it's deflection. It's deflection, and it's the kind of useless patter that we do not need. It's just more smoke and mirrors, Humza. Go on with the job. And to be honest, the reality is Humza is incapable for the reasons that we have cited before. He does not have the ability, the wherewithal, the courage, the conviction, the strength, the character, the stoicism. He's got nothing that is required to bring our country out from under the yoke of Westminster. And for that reason, I don't expect him to last that much longer. He continues to screw up, continues to make a mess of things. Then he's only digging us deeper into a hole that we have to climb out of again. And the sooner he's gone, the better. And I don't want another puppet. Because he's just Mr. Continuity from Nicola, and we should not accept someone who continues to do what Hums are doing with rubbish and nonsense like this. We need the stables need cleared out at SNP, and they need to start walking the walk as well as talking the talk, which even they're not even doing. They're not even talking the talk now.
No, I mean, it's Nicola obviously picked this up from some focus group or some. It was the people it was offending with the unionists, and people would never vote for independence, would never vote for the SNP. She was more worried about upsetting them than actually doing anything else. And that was, why would you, if it's upsetting them, keep it in play? Talking of national, Ash Regan this week made a very valid point, Yvonne, about this. What is the point of the Scottish National Investment Bank if Grangemouth isn't a project that they're taking on? She's absolutely right. Now, we've now know that the fate has been sealed of Grangemouth, and that Scotland, one of the biggest oil producer in the West, is going to lose its only refinery, and the Scottish National Investment Bank is doing nothing. The Scottish government is doing nothing. The SNP party are saying nothing. The foreknown media in Scotland are saying nothing. The people of Grangemouth have been abandoned.
It's such a scandal that oil-producing Scotland is going to lose its only oil refinery. I remember when they came to dividing Sudan, and there was a fight between North and South Sudan who would keep the country's only oil refinery, because it was just unimaginable to have an oil producing country without its own oil refinery. And Grangemouth should be draped in the saltire by now. We should have demonstrations out there, and just this is huge. And once it's gone, it's gone. And we cannot afford to lose the oil refinery. Maybe we should do a crowdfunder ourselves, because it's crazy that Scotland is going to lose its only oil refinery. Put it in mothballs if that is what it has to be, but don't let it go, because it's like the big steelworks. Once you shut down those furnaces, you can't restart them again. It's gone. And for Scotland I do feel sorry for Humza in a way.
Really?
Yes, I do, because he actually has it within his power to turn things around and go from zero to hero overnight, but he'll not do it. And all I would say he's got to do, after Neil Hanvey's performance in Westminster, is to say, stuff it, everybody out, bring out all of the SNP MPs. You're not having anything more to do with those rogues in London. They're just taking the mick. We do not have a union of equals. And if they're not going to work with us, we're not going to work with them. And that's all he has to do. And he would be a hero overnight. And it would kickstart the independence campaign.
Yep.
And as I say, he would go. And he's already made history. He's got his place in history. He's the first Muslim in Europe to become the leader of a country. He's done that. But if he really wants to make his place in history, that's all he has to do. 2 fingers to Westminster, paint his face blue, go down bare-chested in his kilt to London and say, right, everybody out. We've had enough. We're not with you anymore.
Well said, well said. Although I would say the term leader and Humza in the same sentence. But Lloyd, I'm just being my usual facetious self, Yvonne. Lloyd, Yvonne touched on it there. The fact that down in Port Talbot, the big steelworks is now being closed. Wales, who have been so loyal to the Labour Party, unlike us in Scotland who have kicked them out, Labour have stayed loyal to the British Labour Party. Now Port Talbot is also going to be sacrificed. The furnaces are going to be switched off. Absolute deindustrialisation of the Celtic nations. When are the people going to wake up and see this, that we're colonies?
I think people are waking up, but our biggest problem, I mean, I don't like to speak on behalf of the Welsh, despite the fact my wife's half Welsh and my mother-in-law's Welsh. But it's interesting that the steelworks owned by Tata, that's going to go. The largest, the single largest kind of productive industry that they have in Wales. I mean, they lost out badly when Britain came out of the European Union because of Wales's involvement in the European aircraft conglomerate that damaged them badly. But for us, I can't get over this Grangemouth situation. I really can't. I can't. We seem to have politicians who have no real understanding of the strategic needs of a country, be it an independent country or be it an autonomous region, as we are at the moment. The whole idea that you would remove, from your economy a central part of your potential export business is extraordinary to me. But I said this earlier on. On the two occasions when there was a threat to Grangemouth earlier in the century, all our newspapers, all of television, all of radio was concerned, talking about it, aiming in direction of how can we protect it. The government was fully behind attempts to put Grangemouth back into the economy. This time round, no one seems to be paying very much attention. And it's very telling, however, that it is the supposed independence-supporting newspaper, the Notional National, that has the front page, saying it's all over. That's like Stephen Noon coming on and telling us that, we should be looking for maximum devolution. There's a pattern here. There's a pattern in the way we're being played, and we're being played within our own movement by spokesmen like Stephen Noon, by newspapers like The National, and frankly, the incompetence and the small minds of the members of the Scottish Government. The fact that there is not a threat of some kind of action by the Scottish National Party, by the Scottish Government over the issue of Grangemouth is an absolute abandonment of responsibility. But then again, we're kind of getting used to abandonment of responsibility from this particular government.
Absolutely. While we're on this topic, Techie, can you stick up the meme about Graham Stewart MP there we go. I want to read this all out. I'm sure you can, but the oil and gas industry is in Scotland, but it's part of one United Kingdom. Oh, really? The tax receipts come to London. Yes, we know that. And it's allowed the UK and England government to subsidise every Scottish household. Eva, have you ever heard such absolutely insulting nonsense in your life? We steal your oil, we take all the revenues, but hey, we subsidise some of the highest energy bills in the world.
Well, what that guy was actually confirming was that we are not too wee and we're not too poor, but we are too bloody stupid to let them get away with it for any longer. Earlier on there, Phil was quoting Gandhi, but one of my most favourite quotes is Charles Stewart Parnell. No man has a right to fix the boundary of the march of a nation. No man has a right to say to his country, thus far shalt thou go and no further. What Hamza Yusuf is doing and his entire cabinet is doing is hobbling Scotland, hobbling the march of the people of this country, preventing us moving forwards. If you stood in George Square the day before the referendum in 2014, as I did, with thousands and thousands of other people, the place was bouncing. You could hear the noise right round the city of folk cheering and applauding and looking forward with real hope and determination to what was going to happen the next day. That spirit, that potential is still there, but in greater numbers. And it needs a leader with courage and a heart and conviction and determination and strength to stand up to the British state and to corporate interests and to say, that's our refinery, it belongs to Scotland. What it can do is benefit the people of this country. All the wee bairns that are going to school in the winter that haven't got a winter coat, the mothers that are worrying how they're going to feed them, the old wifeys that are sitting wrapped up in continental quilts because they can't put the heating on, the mums and dads that can't pay their rent or their mortgage, folk that are worrying about the council tax, people that are worrying that they're going to lose their jobs, nurses that are looking for extra shifts, through agencies and bank nursing because they're skint, teachers that are buying stuff for pupils at school because the councils haven't got the budgets. These are the real bread and butter issues. These are the reasons. These are the people that deserve a government that will stand up and fight, not one that will say that Grangemouth is going to transition. What is it? Is it going to self-identify as a refinery for a while before it's shut? Enough is enough. I've spoken so many times about my dad working in construction and in the oil industry. My dad spoke like him. They were men that were made of iron and steel. Nowadays, what have we got? We've got steel boats and wooden men because we don't have leaders that will stand up and fight for the rights of our country, our nation. By God, that's what we need today.
This is why I will never tell Eva to be quiet. Because I'm sure throughout Scotland now, people are getting up into their thatches and pulling out their claymores and are ready to follow you from here to kingdom come, Eva. Phil, without the lecture on anti-climate stuff, when you saw this from Graham Stewart MP, did you know the audacity of that bloody man?
It's just more of the same, the issue of the closure and the silence, the deathly silence around it is more sinister, far more sinister. This guy's just talking through his backside as he's wont to do. When the BBC, you look at the BBC, you look at anyone trying to report on this, you would expect outrage. I mean, it's Scotland's only oil refinery, Scotland, but that's the difference. The distinction here is Scotland's only oil refinery, not Britain's. If it was Britain's, it would be a different story. If we were shutting down oil production in the UK, instead of just moving more of the benefits down south, which is really what the modus operandi of the British government has been forever, then there would be a different story. But Petro and Ineos are going to close it, and they say they've been facing significant challenges because of global market pressures. Well, it's going to intend to turn this into a fuels import terminal, which would result in a loss of at least 400 jobs. But that's just the immediate jobs and direct. Transformation, they're talking about 18 months. The refining business at Grangemouth. But remember, this is owned by a joint venture between the Chinese state-owned PetroChina and London-based Ineos and this fella Ratcliffe. About 2,000 people are directly employed at Grangemouth. I know them, it's my game. I work oil and gas, or have done. And there's about 500 at the refinery itself, 450 on the Forties field, the pipeline, from the North Sea, and a further 1,000 in the petrochem business. And all that will be reduced down to the 100 for the planned import terminal, especially if it closes down. And you look at people like Douglas Fraser on the BBC. I mean, he at least touches on some of the threat that goes beyond just the job losses, but it's because it's been a pivotal part of the Scottish economy, the Grangemouth, and that's before North Sea oil. Since before it, refining is that critical to your economy. The problem is we're not separating Scottish economy and British. We're again cutting the legs away from Scotland and adding a couple of wee platform shoes down in England. More money, more work down there. Dependence on imported refined oil for transport, heating and industry raises very serious questions about strategy and energy security. Now that's something that Kenny talked about extensively. And then you get Ratcliffe, the man, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, whose company has controlled the complex for 18 years, or half of it now. He's critical about the political mismanagement of the North Sea assets. And critically, folk, because it's not devolved, he's blaming the British government, as he should. You know, I know the guys that are working there, and that is transferable. Other guys can go and work elsewhere, but it's the loss to the economy and to Scotland, and the ability of Scotland to operate as an independent nation. I mean, Kenny was brand new. There are punitive taxes that Ratcliffe is talking about, and I don't trust what this guy says, but he was scathing about the way that the decline in the North Sea has been handled politically, and that has to do with policies of the British government and the Scottish government. And this green energy that we're talking about to take over, this is essential. We still need oil and gas, whether people like it or not. You know, and I know Ratcliffe talked about a 40% decline in flowing oil through the Forties pipeline. The Forties pipeline's been there a long time. It's set up for the Forties field. And, you know, if you're smart, if you control your energy, then I would be looking at a future pipeline network that enables the harvesting from more marginal fields around Scotland by building a kind of ring main around the existing and future fields in Scotland so that we can more efficiently tap into these marginal fields, because pipelines are expensive, and that is one of the things that renders a marginal field viable or not. And it's a very specialist skill, something we have the expertise we should be looking at. And to have this shut down, not just the refinery, but the Forties pipeline must not be underestimated. It's been around for a long time, but we have the ability to build and manage our resources as if we were like the Norwegians. You know, every barrel counts. That's the philosophy we're talking about. And I would be going on with not just the gathering system on pipelines. I'd be looking at a power energy ring around, given the size and weight of rigs and FPSOs and like. It's not just the modularized hardware and equipment, but also fuel storage and the risks associated with live fuel on a rig and working men. You know, so there's a lot of benefits we should be thinking about. And again, I mean, we can only do that if we take control of our own energy sector. Now, we own 96.5% of the oil. And one of the other things we've talked about is, why is the silence on this? Why is there silence in newspaper coverage and politicians zipping up about it? Well, one of the things you mentioned earlier, fox hunting, and the SNP actually influenced the vote. Fox hunting was the one and only time. It was not long after the 56 went down, and we actually had a debate in a Westminster Hall, and everybody got the chance to speak. Nicola almost lost, and it never happened again. So what we're seeing here is the silence of those who have been silenced. Instead of standing up and fighting for what Scotland needs, they're doing exactly what they're told, and this is just playing right into the hands of those who would keep us on our knees. And we're sick of it. We're absolutely sick of it. We should be up in arms about this, and we're not.
I mean, just two things. One, if I was in charge of the SNP, lots of things would be different. But I tell you what, I'd dispatched a huge contingent to China to be talking to the Chinese about taking over Ratcliffe's 25% and taking over the whole thing and preparing and, you know, getting infrastructure jobs like you're talking about, Phil, in the North Sea. That's what they should be doing. To the best of my knowledge, no one's been near China. And the other thing is that just imagine these 5 refineries in England. If we were in the European Union, not the British Union, and the European Union closed down the 5 refineries in England and moved everything to France and Germany for refining, can you imagine the media and the outcry by the politicians? It would be incredible. But look, the clock's kicking on. There's a few things I still want to get through. Techie, can you stick up my favourite British politician, an English nationalist of renown from the Kingdom of Fife, a Mr. Gordon Brown, on English television recently? Can you stick up that video for me? It's got a brilliant idea, this is. Your Techie's in drinking the sherry again. Come on, where is it?
The multi-bank. We have something in common.
Yeah, you've heard of food banks. But what about a food bank, a bedding bank, a furnishings bank, a hygiene bank, a baby bank, all rolled into one? And so you can meet the holistic needs of families who are in difficulty. And that's what we created, first of all, in Scotland, in Fife, with the help of Amazon and local companies like Purvis. So we had small companies and big companies helping us. And now we have one led by people locally in Wigan, because they're doing something very similar, and they're doing it incredibly well, and they're helping thousands of families in the Greater Manchester area. So
It's called the Brick, isn't it?
It's called the Brick when it's in Wigan. It's called the Big House when it's in Scotland, built on the Cottage Family Centre. So you've got local charities who are coordinating this. They get a warehouse. They get goods from companies that are surplus or unwanted, or in some cases they buy some of the goods. And through a referral system from social workers, teachers, schools, and doctors and health visitors, you get the goods to the people who need them. And what we're finding is that while there is some provision for food with food banks, people don't have bedding to keep themselves warm, like duvets. They can't afford the toiletries, basic things like soap and shampoo and toothpaste. They fall through the net if you're struggling to pay for food. And that's what the Brick has been able to do in Wigan, and that's what we're trying to do in Scotland, and we want to expand it to the whole of the United Kingdom.
I've got to say here, no longer in Scotland does Nicola Sturgeon have the biggest brass neck in the world. That guy, Yvonne, the brass neck and the big smile on his face. We're going to have a superstore for poverty. He was the man in 2014 who told us we'd be better together and how terrible it would be if we left the Union. This is the guy that's never visited Holyrood because he looks down upon it. And he's sitting there with a big smile on his face. My latest, greatest idea is to make poverty even bigger. He is a disgrace to humanity. He's a disgrace to Scotland, and that was shameful. You owe me £1. I'm going to change this from Through a Scottish Prism to you're on mute.
If I had the power and the influence and the ability, I would have him taken away and dropped off on St Kilda with a bag of weed, never to be seen or heard of again.
Yeah.
The weed is just an act of kindness. He really is living in Narnia land. When the biggest success story in Scotland is a food bank, you know that we are in serious trouble. I work as a trustee for a charity, and I really despair that the charities have now become an essential part of society, not just something to help oil the wheels and make people's lives a bit more comfortable. As you say, creating a bloody superstore instead of these
attacking the reasons for poverty.
It's I mean, why not give people decent welfare so that they can live well enough until it's worth their while to take a job, or something just to lift them out of poverty, and giving them dribs and drabs and free bedding. I mean, my God, the UK is supposed to be the 8th wealthiest country in the world. And there we are. The biggest success story is the opening of food banks. It's shameful and absolutely nothing to boast about.
No, it's a disgrace. I mean, I should just say the reason we don't have decent welfare, pensions, or get rid of poverty. I mean, for God's sake, we've got to go and bomb Yemen. We have got to supply 2, 3, 4, 10 billion to let the Ukrainians and Russians fight. For goodness sake, Yvonne, it's more important to go and kill than to look after your own people. Look, we're running out of time. I want you to answer the same question, Lloyd, but Techie, could you stick up Rachel Reeves and her the tax cuts she's going to provide? The Labour Party, folks, I want to remind, she's going to, and the most important point, she's going to lower taxes, and it will include people earning over £100,000 a year. The Workers' Party. Sign the red flag, Lloyd. What do you think?
That's it. We're used to this, are we not? Especially here again, it's another example of how Westminster corrupts, even if you're not ready for corruption. But the 100,000 mark's about right, given the the salary increase that the members of Parliament have just had, they're kicking on for 100,000, so they've got to get them into that bracket. But back to Mr. Brown. The smile of Mr. Brown is because someone's listening to him. That's what the smile is. It's because I'm on the telly. I'm important again. I go back a long way with Gordon Brown, back to early days in television, and he's an extraordinary individual. But he does really believe. I mean, he is the classic son of the manse. In fact, every time I see him, I'm reminded of James Hogg's book, The Confessions of a Justified Sinner. I would recommend that you all go and read that particular one, and you'll understand Gordon Brown and his need to bring alms to the poor, to help out the needy. You know, what was it? I remember Gordon saying, in reference to a quote from the Bible, "The poor are always with us." And that's the principle of the Labour Party. The poor are always with us. It's not in the Labour Party's interest to remove poverty from our society. That's a fact.
Correct, absolutely. Eva, I know how much equalities and poverty plays in your life. Were you not feeling quite angry or nauseous when Brown was spouting that?
Well, my screen was certainly in jeopardy for a few minutes. Does he actually ever stop to think why it is that people are in poverty? In Fife in particular, you know, his own backyard. They're in poverty because the cost of living is too high and their income is too low. Some people are living in poverty that is generational. Today we have people who voted Labour, elected those feeble 50 in the hope that Scotland would be transformed by what was the old socialist ideal of the Labour Party. And instead, all we saw was that those feeble 50 in the main lined their own pockets, made no tangible difference to the Scottish people at all, and most of them ended up sitting in the House of Lords, most memorably perhaps Lord McConnell, who didn't know where to spend the Scottish budget and sent some of them to Westminster. People in Scotland are poor for a multitude of reasons, but one of the biggest is the failure of the Labour Party, who in the end gave up their traditional socialist principles and sold out for English gold. That's what they did. And some of us are wondering if we're seeing the same thing in the SNP today. So you can sit in an oil rig or a wind turbine out in the North Sea and gaze over to Scotland, and all you're going to see are the biggest, bestest food banks and supermarket banks and baby banks in the Western world. What an absolute total disgrace. That man should be banished from sight, never to be seen again. But instead, he'll go home, pat his nice full belly, pat his cell on the back and think, well, there's me done some more good work in the community, rather than radically altering the surface of Scotland by supporting independence and for once in his political career telling the truth about how his own country subsidises the warmongering state that the United Kingdom is.
Yeah. The last word to you, Phil, and on this topic. I mean, there's other things I'd like to have covered, like the missing WhatsApp messages, etc. But I'm sure we should get some entertainment in that this weekend when she can't recall, doesn't remember, wasn't me. There's a big boy in the room, did it, and I ran away. But we'll maybe cover that in a later show. But on Mr. Brown and poverty, he has a height of hypocrisy, Phil, and a man that's responsible for that poverty, not just in Fife, but throughout Scotland, for supporting the English nationalist cause in Scotland.
Yeah, he's got a barefaced cheek. It's appalling. I mean, he was the Labour Prime Minister of the UK, and he and Labour failed us then, as he is now. This is tampering with the minimum fix. You know, the changing of the colour of the sticking plaster, as many have pointed out before. It's about the money, and as Eva's just mentioned. Up the funds available, and we can help look after our own, our most vulnerable, and those in most need, in a fashion that is of our people. We're Scottish. That's what we believe in. We believe in a more socialist state than Gordon Brown will ever come up with. So no, again, irrelevant. I completely agree. I can fully understand what Lloyd's saying. The man's an egotist, and this is about him, not about anybody else. The guy's a joke.
Yeah, he's a loathsome creature. Scottish children should be taught about in future and history of schools, him and a few others who betrayed their nation at birth. Anyway, before I go off on one of my rants, time to call it to a close, folks. We've run out of time again. We never run out of topics, we only run out of time. So thank you for your participation as always. We'll be back midweek, folks, with our global show. But until we see you again, please, please, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.